Go ahead and call the meeting to order. This is our policy committee meeting on today, Thursday, September 28th. Would you mind calling the roll call? Mrs. Hudson. Present. Mrs. Davis.
Present.
And with that, we can get started. Do you want to, Randy, do you want to walk through them, or do you want to ask, forgive me, we just met Jeff, our new Neola rep, to walk through them.
So because we only have an hour today, I think, Jeff, if you want to kind of guide us through, there are a few that I have collected some input from other people within the district that I would be happy to share, and there are a few that we may want to steer away from at this point, but
okay,
I'll let you kick it off.
Okay, why don't we start with the items that are in the current update, 42 number 1 update, and I understand that there's a policy or two that you want to also look at today, one on public complaints.
We may not have time to get into that. Okay. We might just be introduced and then discuss that later time.
Okay.
Thank you.
The first one is actually a bylaw. It's bylaw 0141.2, and it's titled Conflict of Interest. And as you're going to hear, a recurring theme here is most of these came out of House Bill 33, the budget bill. So this is one that did as well. And what it does, it expands the scope of potential conflicts that have to be disclosed by board members. And if you're so affected, you're required to refrain from debating or voting on an issue. That would include political subdivisions, public or private institutions of higher learning.
Great. And so previously it was just addressed at corporations or business.
Correct.
And they just expanded that.
And this is part of the law, so I would recommend that you put this into your policy.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I will just express, as we've expressed previously, appreciate Neola's ongoing efforts to make the wording gender neutral within the, as you guys go through updates. I personally didn't have any questions or concerns about this. Kelly, you
I did not have any questions.
Okay.
I think we're good on that one.
Next one is in the program area, policy 2623.02. This is the 3rd grade reading guarantee. This policy has been revised by, again, House Bill 33. It was discussed during legislation that the retention piece was going to go away, but it did not. The retention piece of the 3rd grade guarantee stays in law, but it gives parents beginning not this year, but next year, the final decision of whether their child is going to be retained. Mm-hmm. However, it still requires districts to provide a high dose of tutoring opportunities for those children, even if they are promoted.
And I did check with Steve Griffin on this, and he's comfortable with the changes.
With the language? Excellent.
So my question just about this policy is it talks about the Department of Education and Workforce, right? And that is on hold at the moment because of the restraining order. So I'm just wondering if we need to pause on these that include that word, that language, or do you exclude that language?
I think either way, we'll be coming back to this language because I think it will continue to evolve. Mm-hmm. Steve's frustrated with
the
everything.
State.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm comfortable either way.
Okay. I'm comfortable either way as well, Kelly. I mean, if we're going to change it again, maybe I have a preference to just pause on it because versus changing it and then turning around and doing the exact same thing again and having multiple discussions as to the changes versus wholeheartedly addressing it with the board as a whole.
Yeah, my preference would be to pause.
Okay, great.
So there are a couple of those in this stack that reference wholeheartedly. So, and I meant to label them. I mean, I labeled them anyways. So there are a couple of those.
Okay.
The next 3 I'm going to take together, 3120.08, 4120.08, and 8120. It all deals with employment of personnel for co-curricular and extracurricular activities and volunteers. 8120 is a relatively new policy. I think it came out of the last update. So the change here, and I understand you do not have policy 412008, and that's primarily because your support staff are not involved in and extracurricular activities.
Correct.
So you can maintain that position. But what House Bill 33 did here is it requires coaches to complete cardiac arrest training in addition to mental health training. And again, it is in order for them to renew their permit or to get the initial permit. So I would recommend, since it is part of the law, that you make that change in your policies.
Again, we have the issue on, is it only on 120 where there's a reference? The workforce. So I think
Is it a reporting requirement?
I think so.
Yeah.
And I have no issues with this, but I will bring up that we continue to add requirements for community members who want to coach, and it's difficult to find coaches. So at some point, we probably should talk about that in a different environment. But
Okay.
But that's a good reminder because when we present these to the board, we'll pass that along so we are all prepared to have that follow-up discussion.
it's a lot of time to become.
Turn your mic on.
I don't think mine was on either. Mine,
You can just leave them on.
yeah.
It's just there's a huge time commitment in order to become eligible to
Right.
coach, and if you're going to make $1,200 or $1,500, people really question that. So.
All right.
So I guess my inclination would be, not obviously, but 4120, we don't have, no
Right.
need to add it. But 3120 and 8120, even though 8120 has a reference that we may need to tweak at a later point, I would be inclined to do both of these at the same time so that those policies are consistent
Okay.
within our, so that they're consistent.
I agree with that.
Okay.
So are you holding on those? Or are you moving forward?
You just want to hold on the language that refers to DEW, or
That's definitely probably an easier way to do it. So we adopt 3120 as is proposed, and on 8120, we adopt the additional requirement, but we don't adopt the DEW language so that we're able to keep the consistency between the two.
Yes.
Thank you.
the next policy is 5113.01, and it's titled Intra-District Enrollment. And you do have this policy in your collection. House Bill 33 requires districts to report the number of students participating to DEW each year. So I think that's the major change here. In addition, if a lottery system is used, it has to be conducted on the second Monday of June on an annual basis.
So if I could weigh in on this, we've checked with legal counsel on this lottery piece because we feel like it could impact our community if we wait to hold lotteries until June because it impacts so many other things for families. And so we are being advised that they do not believe that this applies to our all-day kindergarten lottery so that we can proceed as normal, but that it could and probably does apply to the Phoenix lottery. But at this point, we've been advised to maybe hold off on this because there could potentially be some changes at the state level because this would have some real impact on families not knowing what middle school they're going to go to until, and it could hurt the program as well.
Absolutely.
Well, just in going along with the Department of Education and Workforce, I mean, this does include that language, and so we can always wait
Absolutely.
for that information as well as an update.
Good. I'm comfortable with that.
And this is one area, and I would just offer as a comment, if you have relationships with your legislator, I mean, it would make it very difficult in your situation to wait until the second Monday of June in order to make those decisions for the benefit of families and students. So I would suggest there be some conversation along those lines.
Yeah, that makes sense. Kelly, I think we could probably reach out to that together and share that feedback. Okay, great. Thank you.
5320 is immunization policy. And the major change here is the Ohio Department of Health defines what it means to be in the process of being immunized. And it also gives 3 reasons students may be exempt. It also requires districts to keep an immunization record for each student. $53.20.
And I did check with nurse representation on this. We're good.
Okay.
Okay.
I was gonna say, I didn't have any
that.
questions or concerns for it.
I didn't either. Good.
The next 2 policies, policy 5330 is being revised, and 5330.05 deals with the procurement and use of Narcan. So really, it is a option that districts have if you so choose, if you want to purchase and permit the use of Narcan in your school district.
We do. So we would select this option because we do have it at our schools.
Okay. Do we have it at all the schools?
Tracy, we have it.
We currently don't have this policy, the NARC policy.
We don't have the policy, but
But we have
the
okay. So why not have the policy that outlines how we, makes it clear how we procure and use? Okay. I don't have any concerns with that, especially knowing that we have it. Do we have Narcan at you said we do have it at all of our schools? Okay.
So, the question that I have is about the over-the-counter medication. And so I do think we could still have a first reading on this at the next meeting with all of these other ones, but if you would follow up.
Yeah, I did. I
regarding-
checked in with one of our nurses
you did?
today because of the comments this morning.
Yeah.
And we still have, in order for a child to carry a week's worth supply of, say, over-the-counter pain reliever, you would have to have a parent provide documentation and a signature that they
Okay.
were allowed to carry that.
Okay,
So any pills, cough drops, Maalox that were seen in school, staff members would say, we just need to double check and make sure that you have that documentation on file with the nurse. But
Okay.
then the student would have the freedom to do it. So they actually feel like because that's in place, there's a double check. Whereas prior to this policy being implemented, students would just hide those things. Here's some cough drops, don't get caught with them,
okay.
type thing. So, but I don't discount the
but
misuse
that's
of
helpful.
prescription medication or over-the-counter medication is a real thing. So
Right. I think the double check, the additional checkpoint is helpful.
we can have more, yeah.
That's
Thank you for
consistent
following
with
up.
my experience that, yeah, you can just have a note and
Yeah.
that's how it's facilitated.
There was just, it brought up today as a concern about how that's utilized in a lot of cases of mental health cases.
Okay.
And
And-
it's a pretty high go-to for people in mental health crisis.
Yes, so that they have it accessible.
Right, so that there was a concern if you have a week's worth accessible to you,
Mhm.
how are we monitoring that? But there's obviously that parent check, which is helpful.
Yes. Okay.
I do want to point out in those 2 policies that it emanated from House Bill 558 and actually added extra liability protection for your staff
Right.
if they were to administer Narcan. So I think that was a positive thing for school districts.
Yeah,
Thanks for pointing
thank
that
you.
out.
Yeah.
Next policy is 5337, and it's care of students with seizure disorders. This is a new policy. House Bill 33 requires districts to create a seizure action plan for any student diagnosed with an active disorder. That plan has to be developed in consultation with parents, reviewed on an annual basis. It has to address medication administration and staff training. So Neola recommends that the board adopt this policy.
And we have discussed this as a nurse group.
Okay.
The issue isn't that we don't have plans in place. It's that we have some students who may have been diagnosed with a seizure disorder at age 6, and now they're in high school and haven't had a seizure for 10 years. And we don't have a plan on file. So we're working to make sure we either get a plan on file or get documentation to show that they no longer have a seizure disorder. But the nurses have a pretty good handle on this. I was actually really impressed with the work that they have. But that is a growing
Nurses
thing
are amazing.
in public schools, is these disorders. So
Okay.
we can support this policy. We'll be compliant by the time it's implemented.
Wonderful.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And you're right, our nurses are amazing.
They are amazing.
Moving to the area of finance, policy 6240 is another new Neola policy. It's titled Board of Revision Complaints and Counter Complaints. And I know from my experiences and now my work with Neola, every single district handles these issues differently. So I'm sure your CFO treasurer will probably want to weigh in on this. But the Board of Education now has a limited role in real estate evaluation appeals. If you include this policy, you're going to authorize your treasurer CFO to act within the limits of the law. Neola recommends that you have this policy in place. Has there been any discussion regarding this, Randy?
Yeah, there has, and we've received feedback of a recommendation not to adopt it. So
Not to
that's-
adopt it?
Yeah, and if, we'll talk as a board if we want to adopt something around this and
Okay.
construct something with changes to it.
It is not a requirement that you have the policy. It's just recommended by Neola. Policy 6700 is the Fair Labor Standards policy. You may recall that this was revised last year, and it was revised for any staff member that's covered under the Fair Labor Standards Act, that you have to provide nursing mothers with a time and place to be able to express breast milk. Now they have expanded this to all employees. That's the change in 6700. And I would recommend that you revise your policy. It's probably your practice anyway, but I think it's good to have the policy match the practice.
Did you have any input on that, Randy?
It is our practice,
Okay.
so we don't treat any of the other employees any differently.
Not
I
surprised
didn't
by
think
that.
so. Just
Policy 7440 is facility security. And this actually emanated from districts requesting Neola to add an optional list of security measures to their policy. So I don't know if you've had some discussions. Randy, you're operations, aren't you? Yeah. So you've probably gone through here and already made selections or thought about those?
Yeah, the hot topic is obviously metal detectors. It's not selected as an option now. I wouldn't make that recommendation at this time, but if we want to discuss it, I'm certainly open to having that conversation. But it also adds people who intentionally interfere with our security systems. That last sentence there. So I have no issues with it as marked, but if we wanted to expand those tools for future or emergency use.
I don't have a need to expand it.
I think an example I'll give you is Canal Winchester played Groveport in football this season.
Yeah.
There was an
Yeah.
incident at the football game. It was not students from either school that were involved, but as a courtesy, Groveport Madison Schools allowed Canal Winchester to use their metal detectors for the following football game. So they took their equipment, set it up over there, let them use those metal detectors. Should we want to do that in an emergency situation, we would have to have an emergency meeting because we wouldn't be allowed to do it based on how I read this policy. So,
Okay.
but I don't think we would get to that point without additional
Having
conversation.
conversations, right?
My note says bigger conversation.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
I do appreciate the addition of the people who intentionally circumvent, interfere, or disable security measures. Just that last sentence.
Yes. Kelly, what are your feelings on whether or not we're to add anything else? Do you
I don't
have a
believe
need
so,
to?
no.
Okay, good, I don't either. Okay,
So my newbie question still is, Tracy, what will this look like for us? Will there be no that would just, all this green on the first page will just not be there?
Yeah, we'll not accept any of the green on the first page, and then where we do not have anything below that in our current policy, anything below that onto the second page, we do not have in our current policy. So if you want to add that last paragraph, we can just move that up.
Okay,
So,
I'm aligned with that, you too.
yes.
so we do
Okay.
not have the green on the front?
The green is the Neola recommendations.
The
Okay.
newly
So do we
added
need the
options.
last one?
Yeah, I was going to say we need to go through and select
Yes.
those because I was just talking about the bottom half.
Yeah, but your electronic security systems,
Yep.
the last one monitoring, secured entries, identification,
I think all of them.
yep. Yep,
And then I'll move that last paragraph up under there then.
Okay,
okay, thank you.
thank you for making that clear. I apologize for not seeing that clearly.
No, I'm glad you asked.
Ready to move on?
Yes, thank you.
8210 is school calendar, and it's been revised by House Bill 33. And I didn't look, but does your current policy address blizzard bags?
That's a great
I don't
question.
know.
I do not know that off the top of my head. It looks like it does because it's marked out in this one, meaning that it would be removed.
Yeah, House Bill 33 did away with the blizzard bags. And it provides an option for virtual online education.
Given that we all went through a pandemic, I can understand that.
Yep. Requires schools to adopt a plan and incorporate elements of that plan. So
Okay, so yeah, that's the,
most of
On the
my
second
districts are
page.
taking that option just to have it.
Right.
yep. I would note, though, we need to make sure that we note somewhere that we're going to have to approve the plan by August 1st of next year. This year, excuse me. No, next year.
Next year.
No other issues with that as edited. How about on your end, Kelly?
No,
Okay.
thank you.
Policy 8330 is student records. Again, House Bill 33 requires districts to forward records upon request within 5 days. The law further defined what constitutes records, and it does allow districts to withhold records if a student owes in excess of $2,500.
Say that last part again, I'm sorry.
It does you are authorized to withhold records if a student owes in excess of $2,500. I want to point out that the Ohio Revised Code still permits withholding grades and credits. You just can't withhold forwarding records. And our attorneys recommend that if you have a student with a disability that's being transferred to another district and there's any question, we do recommend you contact your attorney to discuss specifically what records should be transmitted.
Do you know
Yeah,
what our process is for that now?
not with that $2,500 piece. I can find out.
Okay. Can I just hold on this one then?
Yes.
The next two are dealing with transportation. They're both revised. That's 8,600 and 8,650, which is transportation by school van. Beginning next week, school districts can transport non-public students using a van only up to 9 students. I'm sure you transport non-public students.
Some,
Some. Do you use vans?
not that I'm aware of. Buzz.
You can now, beginning October 3rd.
So it looks like we have 8650 now. It's not a new one to us. Because it doesn't say new policy.
Right.
Is that accurate? Okay.
8650 also specifies what the consequences are to districts that continually transport students late to school. It's part of House Bill 33, and I would recommend that you have it in your policy. I spoke with a district last week that has already run into this situation because they had 5 bus drivers resign at the beginning of the school year. So
I mean, it is the law.
It
It's
is
just a
the
matter of making it clear. What were you going to say, Kelly? Sorry.
I was just gonna ask Randy if he reached out to transportation at all.
Well, so I did talk to transportation about these policies, and where they got hung up was the inconsistency between our current practice of transporting students K-8 within 1.5. And so on the first page of 8600, it shows that grades 1 through 5 and then 6 through 12. Well, they delineate that a little differently, but that's because that's the law. What we do goes above and beyond the law.
Okay.
So she just felt like it was confusing to parents. And I said, I understand it's confusing, but if we ever had financial issues, we could revert back to the policy.
Right.
But we're going above that now. So that's most of the conversation.
Okay.
Okay.
We may want to talk about this one a little more because of these changes, but
As in you
Talk
think
about it
there
with
should be-
transportation. I'm sorry, Kelly, go ahead.
Oh, no, just as there should be a pause for further discussion.
no, I think we could probably go forward, but
But
Just making sure that,
Time.
yeah, and making sure that our community understands what we do versus what we're allowed to do in the policy.
yeah.
How do we communicate that clearly so that if you're a new resident and you're looking for the information and you happen to stumble upon the policy first? Okay. Okay.
Policy 9160 is public attendance at school events. And as I travel around the state, this is giving heartburn to a number of school districts, athletic directors, et cetera. House Bill 33 now requires districts to accept cash or allow free admission. Cash must also be accepted at concession stands. In fact, it even goes so far as to say that if you have 2 floors in a building, for example, and you have concession stand on 2 floors, both of those concession stands have to accept cash. And this is in an era when a lot of school districts got away from dealing with cash. So in some eyes, this is a step backwards, but it is part of the law.
Understood. I think we're at a place where we're not going to adopt it from a policy standpoint, have it within our policies. So that was recommended by TJ. Okay.
9211 is titled District Support Organizations. And Neola is offering optional language for employees and board members will not manage or have access to funds or serve as a voting member or officer of a district support organization. Has there been any discussion internally regarding?
There has been, and recommended for further discussion. So what if we leave this as edited and we merely take it to the board to have a discussion about it? Does that sound good?
Yep.
Okay.
I think TJ could be able to give further
I agree. Yep.
input there.
The last policy today is 9270, equivalent education and participation in extracurricular activities. And House Bill 33 significantly modified the law regarding homeschooled students. There was a legal alert, I think it's in your packet as well, that defined many of those changes. I believe there is a reporting requirement here too.
Randy, is there any internal discussion regarding this?
We haven't had that yet.
Okay.
I think it's,
So I would imagine this would lead to some discussion at the board. So my inclination would be we could either have that discussion at the next board meeting and have Angie or whoever else needs to comment on that, ready to do so.
yeah, I think I don't think it will be difficult.
Okay. Are you good with that, Kelly?
I am, thank you.
Absolutely.
So that is 42 number 1 update. And I think you have another policy that you wanted to take a look at.
It was just, we have the policy 9130, which is a policy that we do have. And really it's just, you can go back and look at the policies that Tracy provided to us. And how our policy exists now versus the template. And a lot of this in the template that came from Neola is not something that I'm recommending at all. But just wanting to look at documentation. You and I have talked about documentation of process and just trying to make sure that we have good documentation of process when it comes to book reviews. And so other board members have just suggested, other board members have suggested, looking into having some type of written policy, whether it's an administrative guideline or if it's within a policy.
Yeah.
So just something to look at now, not something we need to discuss at the moment, but just to look further into it, and then maybe at our next policy meeting, we can bring back further recommendations.
Absolutely. One of the things that I've discussed with other board members is inside the district and out is reliance upon the code of ethics by librarians, which is, I think, what we do right now. And what I hear you saying is, perhaps putting that in, not perhaps, but determining whether or not we want to put that in writing, even if it's an administrative guideline, so that we have something to point to
Right.
when we get those reoccurring, what are now at a higher level than we probably have ever seen,
Right.
complaints in that area. I do think it's helpful when there's something to point to in writing, even if we're all on the same page internally, that we know how we handle these. It also, I will tell you, from a board standpoint, board member standpoint, and I can only speak for myself, would make me feel more comfortable too. Like, I know we haven't banned any books, yet there are people out there saying that we banned books, right?
Exactly.
And so having something that we can point to that says,
Because if anyone comes and questions our process, there's nothing to point
to
to.
point to.
Right.
Right.
And so, while I don't believe that we're banning books at all, I just want to make sure that we have that documentation.
Yeah.
So this was a policy that was suggested, but we can also discuss taking other avenues as well.
So I'll take a look at this wording again and think about it in the context of that oath, and not so much maybe in the context of policy, but administrative procedures. And maybe then we can come together. I'll share that oath with you as well, just a link to it. And then we can come together the next time and talk about a proposal to take back to the board. Okay, great.
Sounds good to me. That's all I had regarding that.
Excellent. I did not have any additions, so I think that brings us to agenda item 3, approval of minutes. I'll make a motion to approve our minutes.
Second.
Mrs.
And-
Hudson?
Yes,
Mrs. Davis?
Tracy,
Yes.
you're on it. And those are approving the minutes from our April 27th and our May 1st meeting. And then I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Mrs. Hudson?
Yes.
Mrs. Davis?
Yes.
Thank you for a very
you, guys.
efficient and productive meeting, and pleasure to meet you. And I'm so excited you can make it a win-win and see your grandchildren.
In the next 2 days, I'm going to see 4 soccer matches.
Oh, that's the best.
Enjoy.
When you can